Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Mr. Rosten's Review. We have made it to episode 8, week 10, 30 more weeks left. I know you're excited. I'm excited. 3-day weekend coming up. All good things. So I apologize for the 2-week hiatus. Excuse me. We had a little bit of a break there. We took some benchmark assessments. And then we started new material. Then we had parent-teacher conferences. So unfortunately, we weren't able to do some videos, but we're back now and we're ready to review. So let's jump right into it. So we ended our last week with how Ötzi the Iceman died. And we learned that he was murdered because he had gotten into a fight with another human and for whatever reason. And he was shot in the back with an arrow, and he pulled it out and ran up to the mountains to try to escape, his attacker, and died, unfortunately, up on that mountain. So that is how Ötzi the Iceman died. Sad face. Okay, so then we jumped into our Unit 2, Mesopotamia. And this is an awesome unit because we learned where civilizations began. So we started off with unit vocabulary, and I'll bring that up right now. There we go. And we started off with our unit vocabulary. So you see there are 12 words here that we needed to know for our Mesopotamian unit. And so how we do vocabulary in social studies is we have the word, right? We give you the definition. We have you highlight key terms to help you remember the word and then use the word and then write the definition, in your own words. So we broke you guys up into groups. You were each assigned 3 words to do a vocabulary 4 square. And so on your 4 squares, there were, you wrote the definition and you highlighted the important words again. You drew a picture to represent the word. You used the word in a sentence. And finally, you wrote some similes, some words or phrases that relate to the term. And so we started off with that. And then we jumped into the 5 themes of geography. And we went into the 5 themes of geography because it's really important for us to learn about the 5 themes before we start going into more geography of these civilizations that we are learning about. So we learned that there are 5 themes of geography. We learned that there are location, place, human environment interaction, movement, and regions. We know that location means that there are 2 types of location. There's absolute location, which is done with lines of latitude and longitude. And then there's relative location, which depends upon a point of reference. And I told you guys, I gave you an example of my favorite deli, which is right down the road, okay? So from the school. So the deli, that's my favorite, is relative to our location here at school because it is down the hill, down the road, all right? We then talked about place and how place has 2 types of characteristics. Physical characteristics, which are things that are made by the earth, and then human characteristics, which are things that humans make, like bridges and roads and buildings and cultures and language and beliefs. Sorry, needed a little drink there. Physical characteristics are those things that the earth makes. So landforms like mountains and plains and plateaus and valleys, bodies of water, oceans, lakes, bays, rivers, etc. So we went over place, human environment interaction, which is how humans interact with their environment. So there's 3 ways they do that. They depend on it, they adapt to it, and they modify it or change it. Okay? So people depend on their environment. For example, in Mesopotamia, they used the rivers for transportation, right? To adapt, we do things like in the wintertime, we wear winter coats. And in the summertime, we wear shorts because it gets hot. And then we change our environment. So it's like inventions like the air conditioning and heaters. So in the wintertime, when it gets really cold, the heat's on in my room, right? And it blows out of that big noisy vent. And it gives us some heat and keeps us warm during the winter. And then when we get to spring and summer, when it's getting really hot out, the air conditioning blows out of that big noisy vent. And we're nice and cool and calm and collected because we have the coolest room in the building. Then our next theme of geography is movement. And we know that it's the movement of people, products, or information and ideas. And we talked about how these things, people, products, and information ideas are moved. So we said today that cars, trucks, trains, and planes move people, products, and ideas. But we talked about, for Mesopotamia, we talked about how did Mesopotamians do these things? Well, people moved either by walking or using animals, right? Horses or oxen, and they put, and they use these animals to travel. Products, we talked about, well, what are products? Well, products in Mesopotamian times were crops, seeds, clothing, food, things of that nature. And we talked about how they moved them. And again, people would move them by walking, using the river for transportation. They would use animals to move it, things like that. Then the information of ideas. And we talked about how to get an idea from one person to another, you would have to use the word of mouth or talk, right? Because the writing wasn't universal throughout Mesopotamia yet. So they had to make sure that, if they wanted to share an idea, that they spread it by word of mouth. Lastly, we had regions. And regions, what we talked about is that how it's different places are grouped together because they have similar characteristics. And we talked about whether they were physical characteristics or human characteristics. So the example I gave you in class was for physical characteristics was the weather, right? Us here in New England, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Vermont, Maine, we have similar climate. In the wintertime, it snows. In the springtime, it rains. In the summertime, it's hot. In the fall, the leaves change color and it gets a little cooler. And then we talked about, some human characteristics, which was the Cape Codder the Cape Codder style house. And we talked about how it has that unique roof shape, right? Kind of looks like remember the 5 themes of geography. So we talked about Mr. Help. And Mr. Help, of course, stands for M is for movement, R is for regions, L is location, and P is for place. So we went over the 5 themes of geography, and we made sure that we understood them. And then we started talking about Mesopotamian geography. And we visited 5 stations over a few days, right? So the first station you guys went over was going over some map skills and trying to figure out, where's the title of the map? What does the title tell us? How to use the compass rose. And we also went over how to use the map scale and how to draw key geographic features on a map. So we talked about for mountains, how you could draw little triangles. And here, I'll show you right now. We'll do it right now for the Zagros Mountains, right? We have these little triangles which tell us that those are mountains, okay? We talked about how deserts, we could put little squares for deserts or lines to show that there are deserts here, that there's something here. And then for water and rivers, we just bolded them out, traced over them to show where the rivers were, okay? Where there are large bodies of water. All right, so that was your first station. At your second station, you used an atlas and you gathered some information about whether these statements were true or false, right? So we went through it and we found out that Mesopotamia included parts of present-day countries, Syria and Iraq and the Persian Gulf. We know that the Fertile Crescent was bordered by the Mediterranean Sea and the Persian Gulf, and that the Fertile Crescent was located between deserts and mountains, the Zagros Mountains and the, which one was it? The Syrian Desert and the Syrian desert, okay? And then we got some false statements. So that first statement, Mesopotamia means good farmland, is actually false because Mesopotamia means the land between two rivers, okay? We also know that the Fertile Crescent did not include present-day Egypt. Egypt was southwest of Mesopotamia, but we know that Syria, Iraq, and Turkey were part of it. And we also know that the dry desert made farming in the Fertile Crescent difficult is false because it had the two rivers, right? It had the Fertile Crescent. It had that good soil from the flooding rivers. And we know that that soil is called silt. And we know that it produced good farmland. So we did that for station 2. Station 3 was location, and we focused on absolute and relative location. And again, we found our absolute location of Babylon, and then we used relative location to describe where Babylon was and to describe where Mesopotamia was. Station 4, we looked at HEI, human environment interaction. We learned about how Mesopotamians interacted with their environment. Okay, so we did that. We answered some questions. We cited evidence using quotation marks. And then we answered the question using a Peel paragraph, which was great. And lastly, we found some geographic features of Mesopotamia, made sure to mark them out on the map, and then answer questions about them and how they impacted Mesopotamians. So we talked about how the Persian Gulf provided water, how the Taurus and Zagros mountains provided protection from enemies, and then we went over the Euphrates and Tigris River and how the river provided the people transportation, how it provided them food with fishing, how it provided them drinking water and water for their crops. So that was station 5, and that was a lot of stuff so far, and we're going to stop for a minute just so that way you all can see me again. Hello, I'm still here. So we did station work. We learned a little bit about the geography, and that's the basis for all of the ancient civilizations that we're going to do this year. You need to know where you are in the world and what kind of physical and what kind of physical characteristics impacted these civilizations, okay? So we did that. And then today in class, for yesterday for orange, and then today for yellow, green, and blue, and Monday for red, we're going to read about a certain civilization. So before I bring that up again, I just kind of want to see what's going on in the chat room, just to make sure everyone's behaving. Is everyone behaving? I don't see anything. Hello? Oh, man. No, I don't want to hide the chat. No, come back. No one's in chat? No one's here? Wow. That's crazy. All right. No big deal. Hello to the one person watching. Hi. How are you? No one in chat, really? All right, no big deal. Okay, so let's finish this review up. All right. Let's see. There I am. Hello. All right, so after that, for homework, we wrote a Peel paragraph, right, about which geographic feature you thought had the most impact on Mesopotamians. And so you did that using our Peel writing strategy, right? So we know that Peel stands for point, evidence, elaboration, and link. We know that we need a point sentence because that point sentence tells us the reason why you think your side of the argument is correct, right? It gives you your first reason. The evidence is your text evidence that supports your point. You then explain the text evidence in your own words, and then elaborate on how it proves your point. And then lastly, you write a link sentence, and that link is kind of your closing statement, the way you end the paragraph and start the next one, or link it back to your claim. And I apologize, I need another drink. All right, so we did that. And then today, our mission was to find important information on Mesopotamian geography. And we used the signpost close reading strategy to answer our essential questions. So we know our essential question is, how did geography influence the development of ancient Mesopotamia? So the information we were looking for from this primary source today was information on A, geography of Mesopotamia, or B, how Mesopotamians were in their development. How did these people build up their civilization? So we learned about signposts, which is a close reading strategy, okay? And basically, we learned about two different things, okay? The first thing we learned about was word gaps, all right? Word gaps are basically words that you don't know. So you write a W next to the word or on top of the word, and you ask yourself this question: can I find clues in the sentence to help me understand the word? So basically, what we said in class is just you're using context clues to figure it out. Then we learned about extreme and absolute language. Uh-oh. Oh no, what happened? That's not good. That is not good. All right, let me come back. All right, I don't know what just happened. I apologize. But so we know that extreme and absolute language is language that when you're reading, you notice the author uses language that leaves no doubt, exaggerate, or pushes the limit. And you should stop to ask yourself what the actual thing is. Why does the author use this language? But for our historical purposes, we're using it for what information is the author trying to make sure that we understand, that we know is important. So we read the myth of Gilgamesh and the cedar forest. Oh, it's back. Okay, let's try it again. Hold on. I'm bringing it back. And so the first thing we did was we wanted to make sure that we remember the question while we're annotating. So the question we're trying to answer is, how did geography influence the development of Mesopotamia, right? So we read the paragraph. Oh, I'm sorry.
Chantilly or
hold on.
one of the custodians, please go to the cafeteria. I need a custodian to the cafeteria, please, to unlock one of the doors. Thank you.
All right, we're back. Sorry about that. So we find the word that we don't know, right? And then we put it into our graphic organizer. So the word we don't know was decaying. So we wrote down the signpost that we're using. We wrote down the word in the I notice section. And then we wrote down the definition, which means to break down. Okay? Then if we also were working on extreme and absolute language. So the sentence we found in that had this language is what we wrote in the what I noticed. So for when we use extreme absolute language, we're writing a quote. We're writing down exactly the words that show extreme or absolute language. So we saw Humbumba's roar was like the sound of a flood. His mouth was like fire. His breath was like death. And then we had to analyze that. So we had to figure out what information is the author trying to tell us. So we came up with that rivers would flood, causing crops and property to be destroyed, and sometimes people would die because of these floods. And we took that from this information because we kind of came up with that Humbumba is just a metaphor for the civilization, for Mesopotamia. So we know that whenever that the author is talking about Humbumba, we're talking about Mesopotamia or Mesopotamians. So we took this information, we broke it down, and then for homework tonight, you're reading another myth. Or actually, if you didn't finish these questions in class, which are posted on Google Classroom, you're finishing the questions, and then you're reading another myth from Mesopotamia called the Sumerian flood story. And you're annotating it using the signposts again, and then you're going to fill in a graphic organizer. Okay? So that's what we did in social studies this week. We really did learn a lot, right? We started with Mesopotamia. We learned some new words, new unit vocabulary. We made vocabulary foursquares and put them up on the word wall. We learned about the geography of Mesopotamia, the physical characteristics, the human characteristics. We talked about its absolute location and its relative location. And we talked about human-environment interaction. So I'd say overall, we did a good job. Pat yourselves on the back. Good job. All right. So that's what we did in social studies this week. Okay. We learned a new reading strategy. We learned some geography about Mesopotamia, and we learned some new vocabulary words. All right. So all of your homework with all the necessary materials is on Google Classroom. If you don't know where it is on Google Classroom, it is listed by topic or by unit, of what we're doing. So it's under the Mesopotamia unit, right? And it should say homework number 1, Sumerian flood story. And all of your information is there. If you are red class and you are working on your appeal paragraph on which geographic feature had the biggest impact on Mesopotamians, yours is also there. It is actually right above the Sumerian flood story homework. So everything's there for you. Okay, I even provided you an online graphic organizer for Peel in case you didn't want to handwrite it. And remember, just hit that turn in button on the top right next to where it says share. It says turn in when you're done, so that way I can take a look at it and grade it and provide you some feedback. All right. So next week is another big week for us. We're going to revisit Hammurabi's laws. It's going to be awesome. We're going to do a gallery walk. We're going to look at the laws, analyze them, try to figure out if his laws were actually fair or cruel. And then we're going to finish off our week with some DBQ and benchmark reflections. We're going to go over our UTSI death certificate final draft. We're going to see what we did wrong. We're going to try to fix it. We're going to look at our benchmark DBQ and you're going to meet with me individually one-on-one. And we're going to discuss what you got and how you got there and how we're going to get you better. All right. So I hope you guys have an awesome 3-day weekend. You know, take some time to relax. Go outside and play. I know it's supposed to snow tonight, but that shouldn't deter you. It's just a little cold. It's frozen water. Go outside. Go sledding. Make a snowman. Do something awesome. All right. I hope you guys have a great weekend. You know, as I always tell you, be safe. Don't be stupid. And I'll see you next week on Rosten's Review. Peace.